Welcome to the New School. What we wanted to do was talk about the concept of authenticity and vulnerability in an industry that has typically been super buttoned up, super professional, and a little bit old school.
Okay, so this is a really cool and different episode, and you're going to want to listen all the way until the end because we're going to do a mini mindfulness exercise that's going to help you feel really calm and grounded in just a few moments. I promise you're going to love it. Hi, and welcome to episode number 16 of the New School Video Podcast. If you don't know me already, my name is Candace Carlton, and I'm the head of advisor education at FiComm Partners. I'm joined by our CEO, Meg Carpenter, and we had the really cool opportunity to speak to Ashley Cardini of the Mindful Advisor about her journey from a really stressful but invigorating job of event planning at TD Ameritrade to launching her own business and bringing mindfulness to advisors. She also is about to launch her own podcast, so you'll want to check that out. But for anyone who's feeling overwhelmed and stressed or questioning if you're on the right path, this is the episode for you, especially for advisors who are trying to be more present with their clients so that you can really listen and understand and help navigate their paths in a way that's really meaningful. So this is a super exciting episode because we have Ashley Cardini, who was the winner of the Pitch Your Podcast category of our recent Advisor Podcast Awards. And she's actually been in our podcast workshop and she's about to launch the Mindful Advisor. But Ashley, you have such an exciting story because you were running events at TD Ameritrade before they were acquired by Schwab. And recently you launched the Mindful. Tell us a little bit about that.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So I guess I'll start at the beginning here. So when I had graduated college, I landed my dream job and I was an event coordinator at TD Ameritrade. And I mean, it was very, very cool. There was travel and fancy hotels and interesting people. And I got to meet past presidents and authors, and I had big budgets to play with. But of course, what 23-year-old me didn't know at the time was how stressful that event coordinating was going to be. It's oftentimes said that event management is in the top 5 most stressful careers just after neurosurgeon and fireman. So
I couldn't do it. There's so many details. They change last minute.
Yeah, exactly. So I didn't know that I was getting into that. So about 10 years ago, I was sitting in the Newark airport with an executive at TD, which was like a really big deal for me at the time. We were having coffee on our way to a conference when I realized that I had made this huge career mistake. We were sitting at one of the little cafes near the gate, and she must have seen my face when I pulled out my BlackBerry, because this is 2010. Wow. And I was checking emails, and she asked me, Ashley, is everything okay? And of course I said, oh yeah, it's totally fine. I just need to make a quick call. Everything was not okay. I just found out that I had booked an event for the next week for the wrong day. So I had speakers flying in, attendees flying in. There was tons of money on the line and really my whole reputation on the line that I had built up for myself at that point. And I had just completely messed up. And I was pissed though, because I didn't make mistakes like this. I was really good at my job. This must have been somebody else's fault. Went through all of that. My heart was racing. There was a huge lump in my throat. And I literally, you know how you feel that like wave of dread just washed over your whole body? Like I felt that wave. And so I made this frantic phone call to the Ritz-Carlton in Chicago where this event was. And that didn't help because there was another event already booked in my space for the day the event was supposed to be. And I just had no idea what to do. So I got on the airplane and the doors closed. And for the next 6 hours, I was just stuck in this window seat with no Wi-Fi because this is 2010 and just my thoughts. So I was sitting there, I picked up the Hemisphere magazine on the United flight to kind of distract myself. And that's when I saw this double-page spread on meditation that was talking directly to me and exactly what I was feeling in that moment. And that went on to kind of change my life completely. I had meditated for the first time on that plane ride, and it wasn't perfect. I didn't know what I was doing, but it was enough to help me kind of stop freaking out. And I hopped off the plane and I wanted to find solutions instead of going down that swirl of this isn't my fault. Oh my God, I'm going to lose my job. What are attendees going to do? What's my boss going to think of me? All of those thoughts that were going through my head at the time. And of course, the Ritz-Carlton ended up pulling through. We swapped meeting rooms without anyone knowing the difference, and everything turned out fine, thank goodness. But it was that moment of like the wash of dread that was just such a low for me, but it gave me just this best gift. It was so jarring at that time that I couldn't put words to what I was going through, or that I could finally put words to what I was going through. Because so often we feel feelings like this that aren't so intense. We feel like annoyance, we feel frustration, all of those things, we feel them all the time. But when they're that intense, I was able to recognize what I was going through and began to see similar instances of that blame and shame and judgment and annoyance. It showed up all over the place. And I didn't know that I was dealing with that on a daily basis. So for me, the practice of meditation and that whole scenario was kind of the antidote for me for all of that. And so then I began listening to the Headspace app every day, and I noticed that my life and my work began to change so drastically, and so much so that my boss had even pulled me aside one day and said, Ashley, what are you doing? Because you're really on it right now. And so that's how I was introduced to meditation. I've since gone down this huge rabbit hole of studying and certifications and understanding why and how this works neurologically and within your body. Because to me, there was just such a drastic difference in how I responded to the world around me when I incorporated practices like this. So that was my kind of origin of all of this, how this came to be.
The chances of you being on a United flight where the Hemisphere magazine, which, we've all flipped through those before, not that valuable. But the fact that you opened it at all, that you got to that article, that there happened to be an article about meditation, and that you were open enough to think that this is for me, this is speaking directly to me, not to get overly philosophical or religious or like woo-woo, but like looking back, do you feel like there was a greater power at play in that moment?
Oh my God, 1,000%. Because that moment, it was like, I needed to feel that low, and I needed to find that peace that was going to bring me out of it. And I feel like that kind of was the origin of this kind of hero's journey that I've been on over the past, this was 2010, so I'm still on this journey, that I've been on. And yeah, there's definitely something bigger than me at play here. But also something that, everybody can use and recognize. So, even though I was at that very moment in that pivotal spot, I also think, so many other people who may have picked up this Hemispheres magazine may have saw that, may have tossed it aside, but it may have been their first inkling or their first understanding of, oh, okay, meditation. 10 years ago, this wasn't so mainstream. So that may have been the first time that they saw it, or, so it's everybody accesses this idea of coming into yourself at a different moment. So that was mine.
Obviously, Ashley and I have had many conversations. Like, I feel like meditation and specifically yoga, like saved my life almost. And I think what we really don't have an awareness around is that our thoughts are working all the time, like a machine. And our programming and our default is thoughts of fear. So we're constantly trying to be enough, do enough, validate ourselves, like, and we're like almost like trying to like climb out of a hole is kind of like how it feels, right? And so it's very interesting because when you talk to people, I'll often hear them say, you know, I'm really suffering from my anxiety, and they really identify with the experience of anxiety like it's their own, and they, without this acknowledgement that we all have it, right? Like that's the way the mind actually works. And the brain is almost like an organ that we have to look after, right? We have to like not be consuming content all the time, like being present to the moment, curating our content that we're consuming, and like really like looking after our minds the same way we would look after a child, so that we're able to not feel just like completely overwhelmed all the time.
Candace, I love that analogy of looking after your mind the way that you look after a child, because it's so true. I catch myself all the time, you know, on a doom scroll on my phone, and I have to say to myself, is this what I want to be doing right now? Is this what I want to be focusing my attention on? And that's what mindfulness really is. I like to say that mindfulness is being intentional about what you pay attention to. So it's noticing and taking a step back and kind of watching yourself when you fall off kilter, or are no longer in the present moment, or are doing something that you don't want to be doing. You catch yourself, and then you kind of reorganize yourself. You decide what you want to be doing instead. And, you know, maybe there's nothing wrong with feeling negative feelings. There's nothing wrong with feeling, you know, guilt, or feeling shame, or feeling sadness or anger, because that's all part of this human experience. But the idea with mindfulness is to recognize when you're feeling that way, to be able to see it, feel it, and then you can decide how you want to be after you feel those feelings. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. So I am a novice in comparison to the two of you when it comes to practices like meditation or yoga, and I'll tell you why in a minute. But I also have the privilege of being surrounded by and having wonderful networks and communities of really amazing people, executives and entrepreneurs and business leaders. And, you know, I always love having the privilege and recognizing the privilege to be around people who have enjoyed just like such success, but not success from just a monetary perspective, but just they feel really like personally that they're achieving what they want to achieve. And there's a huge linkage, or a very prevalent linkage, between the people that I am around that are very into practices like meditation or other spirituality practices or yoga. And there's like an energy and an aura and a clarity and a confidence. And so, but for people who aren't there yet, how can you help us to understand like why that exists? Like, what is it about the practice of meditation specifically that can be so transformative? Like, you've already talked about some of it, but is there an analogy or an example that you could share that would help people that are like me, that don't meditate on a regular basis, to like understand what the future could hold if we were to be open and committed to it?
Yeah, 100%. So oftentimes I can think of the mind as like your cell phone or a hard drive on your computer. So when you're going through your day-to-day life and you have a new app open, or you have a new tab open in your browser, I'm totally one to have, 20 tabs open at a time on my browser, then your computer starts to slow down. It starts to not go as quickly. Things start to just get a little bit funky. You might have a virus pop up somewhere, and your mind works the same way. When there's all of these things happening in your mind all at one time, you're focusing on, what you're having for dinner. You're thinking about the past, you're thinking about the future, and you're not being in the present moment. your mind gets off kilter. And so doing a practice like meditation or mindfulness kind of helps you swipe up on all of the apps and helps you X out of all of the tabs on your browser so that you can focus on one thing at a time, be in the present moment, and things just run more smoothly. You're able to give the focus and attention to whatever it is that you want to be focusing on. And yes, you're right. So many of the greatest CEOs of our time talk about meditation as one of the tools that they use. There are so many tools that we can use to kind of access that presence, that thought and presence within ourselves. But that's one, I feel like it's the most mainstream at this point in order to do that.
So if someone were to, like me, were to say to you, like, I've tried and I can't turn my mind off. Like, I want so badly to love yoga because I just know that it will make me feel better. Like I do. I know that, and I want to do it. And I've tried, I've committed, to working with a coach and doing it regularly. But like in the moment, I cannot turn my mind off. Like I can't find that focus. What do I do?
I would say there are, well, first of all, the idea of mindfulness is not about turning your mind off. It's all about being present to what you're experiencing in the present moment. So, that's a huge misconception with the idea of meditation, that you want to clear your mind of everything. But really, it's kind of like you're watching a Netflix show of your life. You're watching the show happen. You're watching what you're thinking. You're watching, what's going on around me without having judgment around it, without, say you're at a beach and you're experiencing what's happening on the beach. You're watching the people on the beach, but you're not judging what's happening. You're not judging what they're doing. You're not making up stories about, oh, look at that guy over there and that guy over there. And what are they doing? And how do they know each other? You're just experiencing it. You're feeling the breeze. You're feeling your feet in the sand and just acknowledging where you are. And I'd also say too, that everybody has their own way of connecting with themselves. Some people just don't like meditation, and that's okay, because that's not the only way to connect with yourself and to kind of reap those benefits that mindfulness or connecting with yourself has to offer. One of my other favorite things to do, and that I tell people all the time, is practice breath work. So my husband, he's not gonna, as much as I love to tell him all of my great ideas for how he should run his life, he's not sitting every morning meditating for 20 minutes at a time. So sometimes I'll just walk him through, if you breathe in this specific pattern, it will help you calm down. If you breathe in this specific pattern, it will give you some energy before you're about to go do this big project. So there's so many tools that we get to choose from. And I actually talk about a lot of these tools in the Mindful Masterclass, which is my program that I run. There's so many different tools that we can choose from that work for us. The key is to try them for yourself, decide what works for you, and throw the rest aside. Yoga doesn't work for you, you don't have to do yoga. Go for a walk, go for a run, do whatever feels good to you. Don't listen to what anybody else has to say, because you're the only person that knows what's going to be right for you.
Thank you.
I think that's the biggest lesson that I have found in my own practice of mindfulness and meditation, is really listening to my own inner guidance. Because everyone else's opinion, as much as I may respect them, is filtered by their subjective experience. And even though maybe their opinion or their advice might be smarter or might drive to our version of, our society's version of greater success, if you're living this life that looks really fancy, and I've been there, and I kind of feel like we've all had moments like that, where it's like everything on the outside looks really fancy and good, but you don't really feel that way. There's a mismatch between your experience of it and what you're actually doing. And so it's just, you're out of alignment. That's my experience of it. And that's always a sign to me of like, oof, I'm like not listening. So I know you talk a lot about, and you're really passionate about really using this practice, because I think that's ultimately what it comes down to. It's like calm and peace, but then, we were just talking about this before we recorded, like I can't access inspiration the same way if I'm not present. If my mind is cluttered, inspiration, the same way you talked about, like finding a solution. It's very hard to find a solution when you're in fear and your mind is cluttered, like you just can't see it. But when you're present and you're able to move that stuff aside, all of a sudden ideas you hadn't even thought of just like seem to arise, and you're like, oh, like we could do it that way, right? But tell us a little, but ultimately, so once you've got peace, then it's that layer deeper of like, okay, accessing our inner guidance system for like what's right for us. And you talk a lot about that, but I'd love for you to share the story of the moment you knew that, as fabulous as your job was, that there was another path calling to you.
Yeah, so this was a very specific moment, actually. So I remember it was right after I had my first baby in 2017. I came back from maternity leave and was so lucky enough to have received a promotion right after I came back from maternity leave, which I know doesn't happen often. As a woman, was so grateful for. But I remember sitting in a boardroom and I was having this meeting and I was on fire. I knew what I was saying. I was contributing in a way that I knew nobody else could, and it felt good. But I was having this kind of out of body experience, and it felt like someone was yelling at me, like, Ashley, get out of this room. This is not for you anymore. And at the time I was like, what does that mean? What am I supposed to do? I don't know. And I was having all of these feelings, and I feel like this happens to so many of us. And, not that when something like that happens, you need to change your job, but it was kind of like a recalibration and this call for me to ask myself, okay, what do I need? What do I want? I don't know. And I had been going down this path of spirituality and kind of understanding how the world around us affects our inner being, or rather how our inner being affects the world around us. And I had kind of kept that a secret almost. No one knew that I had this kind of other life over here. I remember telling my colleagues, oh yeah, I'm just going to go on this little yoga retreat. But really it was this like deep spiritual immersion to understand my life and my purpose. And so I think, that was the pivotal moment for me, but it was this invitation to ask myself, what do I want? What do I need? And then the key there, though, was to find the answer for myself, because so often we'll say, oh, I just need a new house. I need a new job. I want a car. Maybe I'll have a baby. Some of these answers feel like they're coming from the outside and they're easy answers to go just attain. Let me go buy that new dress. That'll make me feel good. But really, it's a deeper question than just what can I get to make me feel better.
Why is mindfulness so important for financial advisors?
Oh, that's such a great question. I feel as though there's so much responsibility in this space, and so much power too, because people with money have power, and we as a collective need to be really intentional about how we're using that responsibility and how we're using that power. And I believe that inherently people are good. We just need to pay attention to what we're doing and to ask those questions. Is this right for me? Is this right for my clients? Is this right for where my business is going? And oftentimes we're repeating the same things over and over that have been taught to us, and that have been handed down to us. And it's scary to shake things up a little bit. It's scary to ask ourselves the questions, and to act on those answers. So I think that's just really important to make sure that we're recalibrating to ourselves, to what we know to be right and true. And in this industry and the way that it affects the world and has a ripple effect around the world and and the globe, really, it's incredibly important to do.
One of the things that I love most about this industry is the impact that we have on the lives of Americans and beyond. And at FiComm, our mission is to extend the impact of financial advice by helping financial advisors and advisory firms really experience clarity through new school marketing and PR, because we know that if we can help them find the alignment and why they do what they do and who they do it for, that they're going to be able to reach more people.
Yes.
They're going to be able to have a greater impact. And so I'm totally aligned with your philosophy. And I also know that in the industry over the last decade, maybe a little bit more, there's been this pretty significant trend, although I feel like it's died down a little bit, but there has been this trend around financial wellness, financial life coaching, and really thinking about the role of the financial advisor. I mean, we had Carl Richards on our podcast, and he's just such a phenomenal demonstration of being that, being more of a guide than anything else, and helping advisors understand the role that they play or clarify the role that they play with their clients. So, I mean, I guess the question for you is, from your perspective, like, has all of that we've experienced in the industry, sort of the transformational relationship that advisors now have with their clients, going from being purely transactional to very relationship focused, like, is that part of your journey? Do you feel like that's why you're here today? And, you want to be a part of what you're seeing as the future of the industry, or the opportunity for the future of the industry?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the concept of being a relational conduit for our clients, that is so important, but it doesn't stop there, because it's, it may have been a trend over the past few years, but this concept of knowing yourself and asking yourself the questions, what do I want? What do I need? How can I contribute in a greater way? Those aren't stopping. And there's so many ways that we can continue to learn for ourselves, that we can continue to teach our clients, that aren't just, there's 5 ways to do this. No, there's a plethora of ways to tap into yourself, to use new tools. There's tools that I'm learning every day that I had never even heard of before, and concepts and new ideas. So it's not going anywhere. I love that this has been a trend, because it's so important, because relationships and being human are really part of why we're all here, but it's not going anywhere. And it's something that we just have to continue to tap into further and deeper. I feel like we've just scratched the surface, but we can always go deeper, and we can always have more meaning and more fulfillment, and teach that and have a ripple effect around the world. I mean, the state of the world, the way that it is right now, we still need to do this work.
I love that financial services has kind of come out incognito about all of this stuff. When I worked at United Capital and I used to have to travel to all the offices, we'd have these action-packed days of business check-ins with all of our financial advisors. And then we'd get to dinner and I'd be kind of exhausted by that point, and people would want to still keep talking about work. And I'd be like, I can't take this. And so I would be like, oh, do you meditate? And that was surprising, because that was something I wanted to talk about, that was interesting and light for me. And what was most interesting to me is all of them did. And everyone was incognito, was like, they need, and I think it's also because, like, if you look at athletes, they're all practicing mindfulness, right? To be, whatever you call it, to be high performing and to be present with people when the stakes are high and money is, like, when you're dealing with people's whole lives and their money and their situations, the job of the advisor, they have to be present, right? Because it's such a huge responsibility, and you talked about it. So I think that's really similar, and I love how it's coming out. Ashley, so you're obviously the winner of the Pitcher Podcast category. Yes, clap for you.
Thank you.
For the Mindful Advisor, you've been going through our podcast workshop, and you're about to launch. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience? Because I know you had said it felt very synchronistic for you. And then I'd love for you to take us through a quick exercise so that everyone could have a taste of what you'll be talking about, as well as your masterclass.
Awesome. Thank you. So, I saw Candace and I had been connected on LinkedIn for quite some time, and I saw her post about these podcast awards, and I've been teaching mindfulness at companies for the past 3 years. And I never in a million years thought that I would be connecting these two passions of mine, working in financial services, working in events, and also this world of mindfulness that I was getting deeper and deeper into. So I saw Candace's post and it was like, oh my gosh, is that where my life is going now? Is that what I'm doing now? Oh my gosh, okay. I think I'm supposed to apply for this. And that was like a pivotal moment for me. So applied for, I went on and went in the podcast competition, and I won. And I had the amazing privilege to be in Candace's podcast workshop, which has just been the most comprehensive workshop that I've been a part of. Candace, you do such a great job of kind of holding the group and taking us on this journey of, we had an inkling of an idea, and Candace kind of helped us, all of us in the group, map out a strategy for what we want to do, why we're doing it, who exactly we're doing it for, so that we're being meaningful with our conversations and intentional. It all goes back to that intention, right? So we're being intentional about who we're talking to, what the outcome is that we want to get from each of the conversations. And so that's just been such an incredible thing to be a part of. So with the Mindful Advisor, which is launching soon, it is a source of inspiration and really practical advice to learn how to think, act, and communicate with more presence, more intention, and more purpose, because that has a ripple effect around our communities, our offices, and ultimately around the globe. So I hope that people tune in to the Mindful Advisor. And I also have the Mindful Masterclass, which is the program that I've been teaching at companies for a couple of years now. It really teaches a ton of tools that you can use to access your intuition, but it all goes back to that basic idea of asking yourself, what do I want and what do I need? And these tools that we use help us get to those answers faster and more deeply. But they all kind of go back to that question of, how am I acting with the world around me right now? What do I really want? What am I supposed to be doing to help the greater good? So I'll just walk you guys through a quick exercise, because we oftentimes don't ask ourselves the question, what do I want, or what do I need? And, I think those two questions can be different. Oftentimes when we think, again, what do we want? We don't necessarily need something external. What do I want for myself? What do I want for my life? And what do I need? What do I need right now? When we get off this phone call, what do you need? Do you need to go take a walk real quick in order to recalibrate before you sit back at your desk? Then take a walk. Do you need a coffee? Do you need to start mapping off your to-do list so that you'll feel, a little bit lighter? Oftentimes, we go straight to that to-do list, and we don't necessarily take the time to give ourselves what we need in order to feel more productive when we get back to our desks. So you guys just want to take your right hand, put it over your heart. Take your left hand, put it over your belly. And I invite anyone watching this podcast to do the same thing, as long as you're not driving.
Or listening.
Or listening, yes. And just go ahead, close your eyes for a moment. Take a deep breath in through your nose and out through your mouth, and let it out with a ha. One more time, in through your nose. Let it out with a ha. And just see if you can feel your feet flat on the ground right now. Just notice where your seat is in your chair. And feel your chest lifting as you're breathing. And just ask yourself, what do I need right now? What do I need? And take a moment to listen to what that answer is. oftentimes we don't actually listen to ourselves. So taking this small moment of time to ask yourself the question, but then listening to what the answer is. Then go ahead and open your eyes. And once you have your answer, go ahead and open your eyes. And, I think the challenge for all of us is once you have that answer is to go and act on it. Because that's the hard part. Sometimes acting on that answer can be scary, or new or different, or you might think, I don't have time to go for a walk because I have to get this email out the door. What do you need? Because when you give yourself what you need, you're able to show up for the world around you in a much more effective and present way.
Ashley, thank you so much for coming on. For anyone that wants more, the Mindful Advisor will be dropping. Follow it on Apple Podcasts if you want more presence, more peace, if you want to be able to contribute more fully to the people around you as well. Ashley, where else can people find you?
On LinkedIn, Ashley Cardini, or check out ashleycardini.com for more information about what I have to offer. I would love to work with anyone who's listening.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Ashley.
Thank you for having me.